Welcome to the Conquer Food podcast with Craig and Paula Williams, where we share tips, tricks and strategies from the coalface of the weight loss industry in the UK. We're going to help you to think, eat and move better. Ultimately, we're going to help you finally gain control and conquer food. Hey up, welcome to another episode of the Conquer Food Show. I'm really excited about this because we've got a panel back together. Recently, I've been doing the podcasts on my own, little solo casts, and as much as I enjoy that, I don't enjoy it as much as getting a couple of key people in the room and then chatting to them and let them provide all the great knowledge. And I've got two amazing members of the panel. Well, I've got Nick. So long time member of the panel, has been on loads of episodes before. You can introduce yourself in a minute, Nick. But we've also got a great guest in Mikey P, who's a massive character at camp. He's been at Team Boot Camp now for 3 weeks. Mike, can you just give us a bit of a rundown of who you are and perhaps how you ended up here and all that?
Yeah, so I first came to camp about just over 2 years ago in 2018. I've had quite an undulating journey since, and I've come back for 3 weeks and had a really great 3 weeks post-COVID. It's been very interesting. I've changed a lot over the last few months, and I think we're going to talk a bit more about that as the podcast goes on.
Yep, cool. That's good, Mike. And Nick, probably worth just introducing yourself again.
Well, I will, because I've changed since the last time we did one. So yeah, I do lots of bits behind the scenes, normally team that, booking people in and making sure stuff's running smoothly. But I'm about to change my job slightly again, just to add a little bit more of what I can do. So still going to be looking after our long-term Conquer Food people. But I'm now also going to be a chef, officially, not just covering, officially a chef.
Amazing. And I know Paula's really excited about that with the food that you've turned out in the past. Okay, so Mike, let's kind of get into it. So the original kind of angle for this podcast was the fact that you are, I believe there's two types of people in this world. There's people that lock down and put weight on, and there's people that locked down and got a grip of their health, and it was a very positive thing in relation to your health, and you're definitely the latter. So I'd quite like to kind of talk about that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the episode. Before we do though, we've got to sort of tackle this elephant in the room of the fact that you came for 12 weeks before. I don't know the best way to describe it, with all due respect, you kind of you went off track a little bit and recently kind of pulled yourself through. So can we talk about that first time that you came to camp, that first 12 weeks?
Yeah. Long story short, I came for 12 weeks. I lost 70 odd pounds while at camp for those 12 weeks. And after that, 18 months later, I put it all back on.
Did you leave, Nick, jump in, ask questions as you feel appropriate as always, but did you feel you'd nailed it, that you had it in the bag, or, what was your mindset? Oh, you just pleased to get out of there by the end of the 12 weeks?
In some ways, I think 12 weeks was a little bit too long for me.
Yeah.
I think I did really start to feel that my body was starting to kind of ache, and I really needed to slow down a bit. But I came away feeling 100% better. I felt on top of the world. I was just under 200 pounds. It's a weight that I'd not been at since maybe 19, 20 years old. I'm 41 years old now, guys. I know I look a lot older. But those 12 weeks at camp really, really opened my eyes. I came a really big guy and left like literally half the size that I'd arrived. Weirdly, the thing I'd like to say most about that time at camp, I went back into my old lifestyle. I really didn't consider changing my job, changing how I approach my job, how I approached the way I look at myself and how to fit exercise in. I didn't put anything into place. It was a huge, huge mistake. One of the things that survived over those 2 years within me is the Conquer Food program and my mindset. And no matter how much weight I put on, that feeling of actually giving myself a little bit more respect and loving myself a bit more and giving myself a bit more of a break has stayed with me. So I've come back to camp this time, and I really did lose a lot of weight before I came back this time. But it was camp that helped me do that. And it was camp that helped me get back on track when I decided this is the time to actually embrace everything that I've learned and really put it into practice. I feel now that the investment I made 2 years ago in those 12 weeks is paying off now. And it's certainly paid off in these last 3 weeks.
What kind of like, when you start putting the weight back on, and I don't know how much weight you end up putting back on after camp, but, you know, what happened like emotionally and in your mindset and like the other, you know, the downside of putting all that weight again?
I did have a few things going on in my life that kind of really, it didn't help emotionally, didn't help with work. The fact that I was working in a high pressure job and trying to deal with not even just a losing weight, just maintaining at that point. I let that get on top of me, absolutely. I didn't realise that a change of lifestyle is what I needed, because I've done my job for since I was like 16. I've worked in pubs. It's what I absolutely know and I've embraced. And every time I've ran a pub or ran a site or ran multi-sites, I've really like taken the job on board. I've made myself accessible to everybody. I could tell that I was putting on weight. I felt, I suppose, still really strong in mind. I still really had a really good outlook. And it's really strange because I really do want to say that I felt terrible, but I actually didn't. It just really creeped up on me. And all of a sudden, I was more than 70 pounds heavier than when I left camp. One day it felt like I was on top of the world. The next day I went to do Snowdon, and I was still thinking, this is maybe like a year after leaving camp initially. I went to do Snowdon and I was just out of breath on the first like kind of maybe 200 meters of the tourist trail from Clanberis. And that's the point where I just thought, something's got to give, something's got to change. That's the real point that I was kind of felt a little bit disappointed in myself, mulled it over for maybe a day or two, and then just thought, no, come on, you know how to do this. Let's start sorting it out.
Nick, what do you remember? Because you was at camp at the same time as Mike. So, I mean, what do you remember about Mike? I've said that he was a big character at camp, and you know.
Oh, definitely. I mean, a lot of people remember Mike from camp, I'm sure. I remember him mainly being extremely fun, extremely positive with other people, encouraging other people. I think especially me and Mike had a really, really healthy competitive streak that we like to capitalise on when we trained together.
I remember you two, like, you know, you were always going at it, like, you know, you got to the point after 12 weeks where you was close to unthrashable, you know what I mean? Because you'd just done that much training and come on that far.
I just remember that I think at the time we were both so determined, and I think at both similar-ish points in our life where we would change a lot of things, and it was like, this is the time to come and do camp. Because I remember, I mean, not that many occasions, certainly multiple occasions where we hadn't finished a session by the time the trainers had called it and it was time to go in, and me might be like, well, no, we're not finished, we're not going in, we're staying until it's done.
Yeah, including
a very memorable us doing bear crawls in the pouring rain, but we were like, we're not going in until it's done. So yeah, but I obviously we've kept in touch and are still friends, and I do remember Mike phoning me one day and saying, I've got an idea, I want to run it past you. Now, Mike quite often phones and says, I've got an idea, I want to run it past you. And it's generally to do with, I'm doing some charity fundraising. Do you think this will work? Or I'm doing this. Do you think it'll work? And then it was I'm thinking of totally changing my job, doing something totally different. And as soon as he said it, you could tell in his voice, he was like, I've already really made this decision. I'm just running it by a few people just to say it out loud. But obviously, Mike, you might say more what you did, but I thought it was one of those, you could just tell it was somebody who was like, nah, something's got to change. This has got to be what it is. And I'm going for it. And it's all those things about Mike. It was just so him. Had
you got to the point then, looking at your lifestyle then, Had you made the realization that unless you actually changed job, changed what you're doing, I know you was doing a lot of shift work and all that at the time, it was going to be almost impossible to get the results you wanted?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a point in your life when you're bending down to pick a glass up off the floor in a bar, or anything off the floor, and you struggle with it, and you think, what is going on?
Yeah,
it's a really scary thought. Little things like sitting in your car and your belly is touching the steering wheel. Things like tying your shoelaces. These are things that anyone should be able to do. And I really, really struggled. It's the little things that scared me. That made me start thinking about mobility in 10 years, 20 years' time. My nan's 92 years old. She's done Tai Chi all her life with a sword up until 5 years ago. This woman is absolutely phenomenal, and she still lives on her own. Last week I had to shout at her because she was up a step ladder, right? She's kept herself fit and healthy all her life. She's been active, and she's an absolute inspiration. And I think that's a really good parallel to where it was certainly not a parallel, a complete difference to where I was and what I want to achieve. I want to live till 80 or 90 years old. I want to be able to walk up mountains. I want to be able to see beautiful parts of the world. I've decided as I'm getting older, I want to travel more. And I went to the most beautiful place last year in Croatia, Plitvice National Park. Google it. It is literally phenomenal. And there's 3 tracks around. There's one that's 3 kilometers long, one that's 5 kilometers long, and one that's about 15 kilometers long. The 15 kilometer one is apparently very nice. I couldn't manage it. I'll go back and I will do that 15 kilometers. That is one of the moments last year where I thought, no, I've got to sort this out. That's a big thing. Tying my shoelaces is a very small part of that as well. But I can't live my life like that anymore. And that's what I decided around Christmas last year.
So just sort of moving forward, then obviously we locked down, and as far as I'm aware, you really sort of went at it in lockdown. Had you made the decision before lockdown that things were going to change, or was it as a result of, or what? How did that kind of come about?
I did make the decision before lockdown, round latter part of 2019. I decided to set myself some challenges, and that's where Nick was talking about a charity thing before, and that's when I decided that I'm going to climb Kilimanjaro for Marie Curie. That's when I rang Nick and said, what do you think about this? This is
because that's a bit more than 15 kilometers, isn't it?
Really is. And I just thought, well, let's set these goals high. And so that was latter part, like I say, probably November 2019. And I organised for it to happen with Marie Curie in January 2021. There's some personal reasons why I did that. Summit Day would actually kind of coincide with the anniversary of Mum's death, and I thought it's almost like the gods were speaking to me that this should be happening because of that day. So I actually signed up on January the 21st and thought, I've got a year to do this. This is what I'm going to do. And I'll be honest, at the start, I really kind of was quite complacent with the diet. Started losing a few pounds, but not nearly as much as I kind of wanted to. Exercise, nothing really happening. However, at that point, I did change my job. And I came out of the pub industry, and I've taken a job in a warehouse. The advantage of working in a warehouse, is that I'm walking about 30,000 steps a night. It's probably about 15 miles. It's a grueling job. I thought this is like free training. It's training that I'm getting paid to do.
I remember you telling me that, and I was like, actually, it is. It's like you're literally on your feet all day.
Like just
all night.
Come back slightly, if I can. So you talked about that you was losing a few pounds. I mean, some people would give the right arm just to be able to do that. I was talking to a lady at camp today, and she was saying, I cannot lose weight. You know, it's an impossibility. And I'm like, rarely is it an impossibility, but you know what I mean? Obviously. How did you get started just with those couple of pounds at the start?
So just with those couple of pounds, it really came down to the amount that I was walking, more so than diet.
So are you a big eater, a drinker? I mean, where do you normally get your excess calories from?
Even though I'm working I was working in pubs a lot, and I have been a big drinker in the past. For the last year or two, it's not really bothered me. I will go out and I'll have, if I have one or two, then I'm probably having 3 or 4. But that's not very often these days. My problem is laziness, not preparing. And when I'm working long hours, I choose a pizza, a McDonald's, anything that's fast, anything that I can kind of get into my body as quickly as possible. I take that option. It's the easy option. It's something that I've always done. It's a difficult cycle to break sometimes, when, especially in the pub industry, because you work in such long hours and stressful hours. You just don't want to bother cooking or preparing anything for yourself at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, I know. I mean, I don't work in the pub industry, and I don't want to be cooking at the end of the day, you know. So I completely get that. I find that some people that like mega foodies that like cooking food, I just don't. You're one of them, aren't you?
No, I do enjoy cooking. I must admit, when the weeks I've covered at camp, I eat very little during the day, because by the time you've made this, made a meal for 30 people, I'll be honest, I then don't want to really eat it myself. Like, obviously I've tasted it to make sure it tastes okay. So by the end of the day, I'll have something, but even then it's something kind of quite light. And then so this week I've not been in the kitchen. This week I'm a bit like, food's a thing. I'm going to go back and have some food.
It's interesting you say that now, because especially in the pub industry, I mean, I'm actually surrounded. People always say, "Oh, you must be surrounded by burgers and the bad food." I'm actually surrounded by good food as well. The thing is, you're serving this food all day. You kind of get sick of the sight of it in a way. And then when you get home, rather than ask chef, because I've had chefs work for me, by the way, it's kind of quite easy to kind of say, "Do us a favour, chef, make a salad." Still don't want to look at it. It's the pizza option that I took, and that was a huge problem for me lifestyle wise.
Mm-hmm. So then we got into lockdown, a change in job. Did you have some stress there related to, was you furloughed or anything like that?
No, quite the opposite. In fact, the retailer I work for come under a bit of pressure in the media for people being too close together. And a few pictures on in the media. Quite weirdly, when this was happening, I was actually on holiday, and I had 2 weeks holiday. As this was going on, I couldn't do anything because the lockdown had already started. I was so bored, stuck in the house, not being able to go out. The option of the pub had been taken away from me. Takeaways were shut anyway because no one knew what was going on. So when the retailer I work for actually decided that they were going to furlough staff, they put a choice out there. And they said, "Do you want to furlough? If you want to furlough, that's fine. Everyone else can stay." And I said, "Well, I'm bored at home. I've got nothing else to do. I'll work." So there weren't many of us who stayed. But when I went back to work, I just kind of thought, this is it. I don't have access to takeaways. I don't have access to McDonald's. I can't ring anyone at that. I can't go to the pub. So let's start walking to work. Let's start preparing food. The canteen had shut in work. It just seemed like a really convenient time to pull it all together. So that's what I did.
So then during lockdown, I mean, at some point you made the decision you was going to come back to camp, and you've just got to the end of a 3-week stay. Mm-hmm. You leave tomorrow. What kind of brought around that decision? Or
the decision to come back to camp was because I was very successful at weight loss before I came back to camp. Maybe a month in, I'd lost a significant amount of weight, but I very quickly realised that I wasn't exercising enough. Coming to the start of camp, I've actually lost 4.5 stone.
That's incredible. In what time frame? So since Christmas?
Since Christmas, yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
And that's mainly food, but still a significant amount of walking with that, walking to work, walking back, quite a lot of steps around the actual warehouse every night. But I knew that I needed to up my game. I needed to introduce more exercise, more varied exercises. I needed to move in a different way more than I was allowed myself to do. And still in a very positive frame of mind, by the way. I kind of thought, well, camp's a no-brainer for me. It's also, I hate to say it, but I've treated it as like a little bit of a holiday.
Yeah.
Because although I've been training from 7 a.m, some days till 4:30, when everything's out the way, I've had the evenings to myself, which it's been a long time, really. So even like kind of the mental break at camp has really, really helped. But I really just decided, because I know this is a good place for me. I know this is I don't want to say safe, but it's a very safe feeling environment when you've had issues with food, and it's a very non-judgmental environment. And I'll tell you what, the one thing I was scared of, because I have been back to camp in the meantime for 2 weeks or 1 week. During those 2 visits, I was terrified of being judged for how far gone I was, how much weight I'd put on, and how I couldn't do what I could used to do. I just got rid of that. I just decided, no, it's not about what other people think about me. It's what I think about myself and how I feel. And knowing all that and knowing that there'd be no judgment at camp was probably the biggest thing that got me back here. And I'll be honest, I think over the last 3 weeks, I've had a more valuable 3 weeks than I ever thought I would.
Amazing. So we'll come away from camp a little bit, and I kind of want to get some, for people listening, like what your advice would be to them. I mean, you must sort of meet people that say, like, how the hell have you lost weight? You know, what are the things that you say to people that ask?
Do you know one of the best bits of advice I ever heard, and I say this to most people who ask me, and this is not camp related. It was a celebrity who lost weight, and I was reading a report about him. I can't remember who it was, but I think it was Chris Moyles, and he put it in a way that made so much sense to me. And he was talking about food, and he was talking about depression. And he said, when I eat 3 times a day, I feel the happiest. It's the happiest I feel during that day. For those 45 minutes, I'm on top of the world. And for 23 and a quarter hours a day, I feel miserable. And he said, one day I decided, well, isn't it better that I feel on top of the world for 23 and a quarter hours a day and feel terrible for those 45 minutes, right? And he said, and from that point, I started eating the food that I didn't want to eat, the food that I knew was going to make me healthy, but I started off feeling like quite miserable about the food that I was eating. But I really did start seeing a difference. And within a couple of weeks, I started feeling on top of the world for those 23 and a quarter hours a day. And another 2 weeks later, I really started enjoying the food that I was eating, and really started to kind of put thought into what I was into the healthy meals I was making. And 6 months later, he felt on top of the world 24 hours a day. And I think that's a really interesting way to look at it, because that's kind of how I felt. Eating a pizza, oh, mate, I was like a pig in the proverbial. Absolutely. And you don't realise that you're not happy in those 23 and a quarter hours a day.
Yeah.
And the realization that you're not it can be life-changing. And knowing that you've got the power to kind of change something by actually eating like a bit of fish and some vegetables.
Which actually, when you get into it, it tastes nice, you know. But Paula and I think that's one of the biggest things that we get a lot of people who come to camp with, oh, you'll know this, Craig, with the list of things that they won't eat / don't like. And some of them, you do kind of think, well, what have you been eating? Like, you know, other than you must purely be living on McDonald's or takeaways or whatever, but it's almost like they've limited their choice so much that, like you say, even the thought of you've got to eat other foods, you've got to sort of almost force yourself for those couple of weeks to get your taste buds to adjust and like new things again. But I think probably because I've always had quite a lot of things that I like, there are just some things I'm like, how can you not, like, you know, or people say, I've got 4 vegetables I'll eat. And you're like, yeah, okay, well, that needs to expand.
Whenever someone says to me, like, I'm a really fussy eater and they're overweight, I think, well, no, you're not. Because you clearly don't give a shit about what you put in your mouth. It's just you're very fussy when it comes to like real foods, you know, and that's, you know, that tends to be what it is. We kid ourselves, don't we?
Yeah,
you know, we shit like that. And I've been there, like, you know, I know exactly what it's like. What else would you say, right? So, I mean, that was just a great answer, by the way. But I want to get a bit more from you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just making that decision. And I mean, Paula used to talk about this all the time. I'm finding your why.
Yeah.
And
would you sort of talk about what you why? We often, you know, there's 2 types of people. There's those that are what we call away from motivated and those that are towards motivated. The things that you are talking about, these are very much away from, you know, so I couldn't, are they? So, you know, I couldn't tie my shoelace, you know what I mean? So you've got this present pain that you want to get away from. And the thing with any kind of motivation is the further you get from them, the less motivating it is, you know? So how did you keep yourself motivated in that period from like before Christmas right through to lockdown? I mean, you did when was it you came back to camp? It was, when did we open? June, was it? End of June? No, July. 4th of July. Yeah. 4th of July, Independence Day.
Yeah, I came back the week after, so the second week camp was open.
Yeah, so you had a period of like, what is that 6 months, is it, or something like that?
Fair enough, yeah.
Yeah, how did you keep yourself motivated? Did you just have a constant thing in your mind, or?
Kilimanjaro has kept me motivated, especially when now there's an inspiration, a person of inspiration for me at camp. You both know him, Stefano. I think has just
he's coming on the podcast.
Is he?
Yeah. Next week he's doing an episode. Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, he's such a nice guy, and I think the change he's made in his life, and following him on Facebook is absolutely being inspirational to me. When I put up on Facebook that I was going to be doing Kilimanjaro, I said, this is what I'm going to be doing. Here's the link to my page. You'll probably see it a lot over the year or two, I'll be quite honest. But this is what I'm doing. Within 5 minutes, he'd sponsored me. And I haven't looked at his journey and met him. That was enough for me to kind of go, I can't let not just him, but I can't let anyone who sponsors me down. Their faith in me has really, really kind of pushed me to my limits in some ways. I mean, today at camp, I'll throw a big shout out to every camper, because everyone who comes to camp I think is phenomenal. To make the journey, to make the decision to come to camp, it's great. But there's some people who shine for me. Last week on Challenge Day, we got right round one of the trainers' courses for Challenge Day. And I just cannot do sit-ups. I've never been able to. I've had an operation on my stomach years ago, and I've convinced myself I can't do a sit-up. So in this session, the 2 tires on top of each other, and Mick goes, like, you can stick your feet in between them if you like. And I go, okay, I'll try and get 5 out. And I got to 5. All right. I'm nearly at my limit. I'm gonna maybe get to 8. And then Jenny Draper sat over the tyre. And I thought, oh, you absolute knobhead. And she encouraged me right the way through to 25. And honest to God, I was in so much pain, and I did it. And I'll be honest, I burst into tears after it. I was absolutely overwhelmed by the fact that I did it and the fact that someone had faith in me. and her and Stefano are in the same boat for me. They're the people I don't want to let down as far as Kilimanjaro's concerned, and that's where it's all come from. That's what I'm going to do. Camp over the last 3 weeks has really highlighted that as well. And thanks to Jenny, I've probably had the best week I've ever had at camp just now. After finishing that challenge a week ago, I have leveled up. Absolutely, I feel I have. Yeah.
So I remember when I was getting ready to run across the Sahara, and I'd listened to a presentation by James Cracknell, who is just phenomenal bloke. And someone said to him, how do you keep yourself motivated? And he says, I always, when times get really tough, I always think about all the stuff that other people have given up for me to be doing what I'm doing. And that sounds very much like what you're saying. You know what I mean? Yeah. You've got a privileged opportunity to go and do this stuff, and people are backing you. And I think, Kili, the tallest freestanding mountain in the world, it will find people out, and yeah, everything you're doing right now is going to be on display. Like
it really is. So it really is. And I'm always one to put myself out there, but I mean, this is. I feel a very vulnerable position that I'm putting myself in. I don't want to fail. I will not fail. The way I feel at the moment, I could climb it tomorrow. I think my man boobs would slow me down. But I mean, they're way on the way to going. I've got another couple of ideas to get myself fitter. It has actually been put off because of COVID. So the actual climb is now taking place in 2022, which is, I mean, I didn't get myself disappointed about that. I thought, well, I've got another year to get fit enough and I'll enjoy it more. And the difference between being fit enough to actually hoof yourself up there and drag yourself up there to being fit enough to actually embrace what's around you and the surroundings, I think actually kind of even spurred me on a little bit more.
But you can tell that from your different mindset though, because some people would be like, "Oh, brilliant! I've got another year, so I can just leave the training for a bit, or I can have."
There's
a little
definitely
break
a case for having too long a time to prepare.
Yeah. Whereas you're already like, right, it's here. So now, and I know obviously with your fundraising stuff, you've now been like, I can do even more in between, and I've got this, and do you want to come along and do this? Whereas some other people, they would be like, oh well, that's a year, so I can postpone now for at least 6 months before I've got to think about it again. So you can just tell even from the way you think that you're like, right, I've got that, but that's just a way of enhancing this experience rather than delaying what I've got to do for it. It's really good.
Oh. Nick, as a bit of an outsider, but knowing Mikey P really well, what would you say some of the factors that have made Mike successful, but both time rounds? Because end of the day, you put in the work and you made like a £70 loss in the past. All right, it's normal for people to have a bit of up and down and all that kind of stuff, but you've come back and that is brave. I know it is. I know we always try and say to people, look, we're going to give you the gift of non-judgment, but it would still be inside you to think, what they're going to think of me and all this. But what do you think is? I
think one of the things is that he's very naturally determined with things. So like if he sets his mind to it, it's going to happen. It's not a sort of I've had this vague idea and I might try and make it happen. Like when Mike phones you and says, I've had an idea, you already know that decision's made. Like it's happening. He's just really bouncing that idea around a little bit more. Yeah, no, I'd definitely say determined.
Where does that come from, Mike? The determination.
I honestly don't know. I mean, body-wise, I don't. I mean, as a pub manager, I've always kind of been a guy who's good at ideas, but not the greatest at implementation. So I've always surrounded myself by people who can do that for me. This time round, I think I've just decided at some point that I've got a bucket list. There's parts of the world I want to see. I'm a really big believer that an experience is more valuable than an actual item than a house, than anything that I can own, and that's really what's spurring me on at the moment.
Yeah. What else, Nick?
I would say another thing is that Mike's very willing to ask people for help. So obviously with this charity stuff at the minute, I know there's people who's asking, can you help me organise this event? Can you be part of this event and help me do the fundraising? When I think it's come to changing his life, it's been that realisation of I don't have to struggle and do this on my own. So coming to camp in the first place was there's people here who will help me. In between times, as like you say, people's weight goes up and down, and there's been times where Mike's phoned different people and been like, right, we need to have a little bit of a kickstart here. Do you want to come and climb this mountain? Do you want to come and do this? Or even just supporting other people. Whereas I think some people feel there's almost like a weakness in saying, I'm not coping well, or things aren't going well right now. Or actually, I mean, most people know as soon as they've actually said to somebody, I'm struggling, it seems so much easier because you've already got over, like you say, that first, how are people going to think? Are people going to judge me? And nobody judges you if they're actually your friend or actually someone who cares about you. They're just like, right, let's get this sorted. How do you want to do it?
Well, I mean, my thing on that, I know I don't conform to everybody's way of thinking, but it's the fucking reality. You know what I mean? It is what it is, like, and we all put weight on. I put a good few kilos on over lockdown and I felt it, but that's the reality. But instead of like running from it, we just need to go, okay, that's what it is. I'm going to change everyone's, thought of me or whatever. And
because I think that's where people I know anyway, and people I've met through camp, but that's where things go really wrong, which is they put on a bit of weight and either they're in total denial of it themselves, or they have the classic kind of diet starts Monday, but Monday's never ever coming. And it's never coming because they're too scared again to admit it's gone wrong. They're too scared to ask for help. And actually it just takes that one, almost like one person to go, okay, you've got this, you did it before, you can do it again, or I'm here for you, we'll sort it out. And I think that is one thing that I know also Mike's very supportive of other people at doing, so maybe that's why you're so good at kind of saying it yourself when you do need help. But yeah, I think that's a very admirable quality, because I think a lot of people they don't do that, or they leave it so late that it's then harder, not impossible, obviously harder to then do it.
I think without getting into like a bit of a gender thing, it is a male. It is a very common male trait where it's like, well, I'll sort this out myself, and I don't need to ask for help. And I think why it's predominantly females at boot camp quite often is because they're happy just to hand it over to a coach and say, just tell me what to do and I'll do what I can. Whereas blokes, especially around our age, Mike, is like, oh, sort this out, you know what I mean? It is a what's the word I'm looking for? Admirable trait. To be able to do that, it's good. Anyone else getting a sweaty ear? You're really sweaty, like a little sauna on my. Maybe it's the size of my lugs.
Perfectly dry ears.
All right, so we've been going like 40 minutes now. So I want to start wrapping it up. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your goals for your fundraising, just for people that are listening, that people that know you and might want to sponsor you and get involved.
So I mean, through Marie Curie, it's one of these things that you need to raise a certain amount of money to be able to go. The goal from Marie Curie is about £5,500. I'm paying for the cost of it myself, which is about £2,500. So technically, I really only need to raise £3,000. I want to beat that. I really want to smash that.
That's a stubborn, determination.
I really want to beat that. And I'm well on the way to beating that. I've been lucky. I've got, pub connections are still there, so I can raise money through pubs. I do a bonus ball. I've just released a couple of Christmas ones, which is £10 a ticket. The prize is £400 being drawn in December, just a couple of weeks before Christmas. If anyone wants to get on board with that, I know some people have, but you can just look at my Facebook page. But I've got lots of other events planned. So I'm going to be organising a trip along the Leeds to Liverpool Canal, and I want people to get involved. Maybe 4 or 5. We're going to organise a trip so people can get themselves sponsored, but it'll go towards the total for Marie Curie and tick a few £100 off for me as well. We'll also be doing over the course of 2021. Now I've got the time to do it. A 3 Peaks walk, which I'll be organising. Not this 24-hour stuff that you get involved in, Craig.
The luxury 3 Peaks experience.
A luxury 3 Peaks experience, absolutely. Over 3 days. And that'll be worked out. So it's everyone who's involved. I'm probably looking for about 8 people for that. Are going to kind of be looked after by yours truly. It'll be a bit of training as well for me, and we're gonna hopefully raise quite a bit of money. I think conservatively I can raise about £8,000 over next year. I'm really excited about it, to be quite honest.
I think the brilliant thing about those challenges is that for people who have heard Mike talking about Kilimanjaro and go, well, that's maybe a bit too much for me right now. But any of those other challenges, you can be like, right, this is what's going to motivate me now. This is I need to get fit for the Canal Challenge or the Luxury 3 Peaks. Or, I mean, Mike's going to come up with at least half a dozen other ideas before anything else. But, I'm sure there'll be people listening going, I want a goal, and one of those things might appeal to you. And it's a really nice thing because, like you say, once you've signed up to do it for charity, there's no getting out of it. Other people are then, got expectations. You want to do well because you want to raise the money for the charity, and it's quite exciting. I mean, we did a charity walk when we were at camp together, which was one of the most ludicrous but funny experiences of my life. But again, the day we went to do it, it was pouring with rain, so we were walking a marathon. We were going to go to Telford. I'm sure a lot of people will have heard this story if they know either of us. But it was the rainiest day of May of that year ever. I mean, we were soaked before we'd got down to the river, and the plan was to walk along the river till we got to Telford. By the time we got to Lower Camp, we both admitted afterwards we considered saying to the other, should we not do it? But,
my underwear was wet by the time we got to Lower Camp.
I had water running down my trousers into my shoes at this point. This is how wet it was. But people had sponsored us. It was the only day we could do it. So it had to happen. And it was, and there is that part of it of once you've got that commitment, you do the training for it, you get ready for it because you want to do it. And especially with the Luxury 3 Peaks Challenge, you'll get to take some pictures and be there in the daytime, maybe rather than the 24 hours where you stumble about in the dark. But, you get the accolade of doing it faster, I know.
Yeah, I mean, talking about my determination, I remember being sat in Nando's in Telford, and we realised we probably had about about
10 miles
to go, which we realized so we found a point that we could walk to and back, and Nick's going, we can do this, and I was thinking, no, Nick, we can't. We really can't. No, Nick, just say no. And Nick's going, come on, we're going to do it. And I'm like, oh, for Christ's sake.
But you also know, you asked that question to exactly the wrong person. You wanted to do it. Otherwise you'd have said we're not. You wouldn't have even given me the option.
I knew you were going to do it. I knew it was going to happen. And then, I mean, Nick loves the end of this story when we finished it and we're outside Asda. And Nick goes, I just need to go into Asda. And I went, Nick, I feel like I need to sit down. And she just looks and she says, Mike, sit down now. Because I look like Casper. I mean, I'd gone pale and I sat down. And Nick went into Asda, and this guy walked past, and I swear he put his hand in his pocket to throw me £1. That's how homeless I looked at that sitting out. I looked like I was begging. I was an absolute state. But we did it, Nick.
We did it. It was
we did
it.
It
was good. It was good fun. Do you know what we found out since though? That we followed a really old footpath along the river. We've now found 100 yards to the left of that. There's a cycle track that we can walk the entire way.
An amazing cycle track.
Yeah.
An amazing cycle track, which you took, which I was taking down last week for the first time, and thought, oh God, we put ourselves through that.
Well, we did when we drove the route, didn't we?
Yeah.
And he was like,
I was like, this looks familiar.
I realised how much of an idiot.
But you know what? It wouldn't be as fun crawling through that field of donkeys. You nearly falling in the river. It wouldn't have been as fun. It was good. It was a good.
If I'd fallen in the river, I wouldn't have been any more wet.
No, you really wouldn't.
That's bad. Well, I mean, in regards to challenges, if you need me, I'll be there. I'll definitely get involved in that if I can help. Okay, so I always ask what our little afterburner is. Your one bit of advice, one mantra, or something like that. Nick, I'd like to get one from you as well. Sure. So yeah, people listening to this, obviously, we can guess the Conquer Food Show. People that are struggling with food, with fitness, trying to lose weight, maybe been successful losing a little bit of weight in the past and looking to level up, like I was talking about before. What would be your mantra or your one bit of advice for them?
Pinning it down to one bit of advice is really, really difficult. I can only say, coming back to the mindset from 2 years ago, I can only say how I walked away from Conquer Food and how I felt about myself, loving myself has really helped me 2 years later. So looking at yourself from within, understanding yourself a bit more, positive affirmations, everything that almost sounded
you weren't
to
into
me,
all that, was you? When you
absolutely not. And I was just about to say, I just thought this was wishy-washy shite. Yeah. Absolutely. I remember one of the most powerful things I've ever done was something that Paula asked me to do, and I thought, oh, bollocks. And it was a letter to myself, to my younger self, giving advice. And I wrote this letter, and I thought, oh, I'll mess about with it. I'll have a laugh. And this letter flowed. Nick will remember it. Nick was there when I read it out. And I just had a laugh with it and had a joke and put it at the end. And it is possibly the most powerful bit of writing I've ever done. When I read that out in Conquer Food, I was a mess. I think quite a few other people were teared up as well. And it's really opened my eyes. Just love yourself, guys. Just find a way to tell yourself that you love yourself the way you tell other people that you love them.
Amazing. That's a good one. Yeah. Nick, what you got?
I think mine for today is going to be for lots of the people who get in touch with us, who just, like you mentioned somebody earlier who's like, I just can't lose weight. I just can't do this. I think my one thing would be is you just have to make the decision that you are. So whether that's that you, a bit like Mike, you're going to kind of make changes at home and do stuff for yourself, whether it's that you're like, now is the time to book camp. You just have to sometimes just do it. Like you can spend all your life thinking about doing stuff and hoping and wishing things are going to be different. But to actually make it happen, there comes a point you've just got to do it. And I think for some people who are probably listening, hopefully, Mike will have inspired you. But yeah, just do it. Whatever it is in your heart of hearts you need to do to make those changes, just get it done.
Amazing. Right, Mike, it's been an amazing episode listening to you. There's some stuff come out there. I'm just like, that is just gold, absolute gold for people to listen to. I'm going to be really keen to keep an eye on what's going on with your upcoming challenges and that. And if Paul and I can help in any way, then remember to give us a shout. Nick, thanks again for joining us.
I'll be back anytime.
Just looking forward, we've got Stefano mentioned, he's featured in this podcast. He's coming in to do a talk, as well as an episode with a young lad called Charlie Dart, who has got a great weight loss. Did you meet Charlie?
I don't know Charlie.
No, I know Charlie. Charlie's brilliant.
Yeah, he talks really, really well about his weight loss journey, losing... I was told at the age 18 that he was going to be dead by the time he was 30, unless he booked his ideas up, and he 100% has. So that's all coming up. Okay, Mike, thanks again. Any final things that you want to say? Any boot campers or staff that you'd like to give a bit of a shout out to?
Well, absolutely, Sharon. Last day today, and the food's being amazing. It always comes back to food, doesn't it? I'd also just like to say thanks to all the trainers over the last couple of weeks. A couple of new ones that I've never had before who have absolutely put me through my paces. Reese's session through the week. Oh my God. Don't let anyone tell you he's the easy trainer. He is absolutely not. And Sharpie had him for the first time a couple of weeks ago as well. If you're 40 metres away from him in a field, it sounds like he's bloody next to you, mate. Good fella, really good people, and I've had a really good few weeks here. Craig, thank you very much.
Amazing. Okay, so until the next episode, take care.